Three, two, one, here we go. Rainman's Take podcast. Observations on the world we live in. My take on current events and other topics of interest. Also interviews with some really cool people. So let's get the conversation going. Hey everybody, it's the Rain Man. Just want to give a quick shout out to everybody watching. Thank you very much. I know you're going to find this next raindrop thought-provoking. I feel very strongly about these subjects, and I know you do too. So go ahead and hit the like button and subscribe. That way we can continue bringing you great content in the future. So thanks again for being a part of Rain Man's Take, and enjoy this raindrop. Hey everybody, it's the Rain Man coming at you today with a quick raindrop. I'm calling it by the numbers. And what I'm doing is highlighting some numbers that I've heard recently, over the last month or two on the news about things that have been going on out there. And I find them fascinating for the numbers that I'm going to describe. So let us start with, or at the beginning, 0. So over the last couple of weeks, it has come out that the Durham, the independent counsel, investigation into the whole Russian collusion narrative that was spun throughout the entire term of Donald Trump's presidency. The Durham investigation came out recently, and not naming her specifically, but basically charged, not even charged, that's the wrong word, but basically alleged that based on their investigation that the Clinton campaign during the 2016 election, and then not only the Clinton campaign, but then also the bureaucracy of DC throughout Trump's presidency, were actually spying on them, trying to dig up dirt, trying to dig up anything they could to help connect with the Russian conspiracy and the Russian collusion narrative that they had started during the election cycle. And what I found over the last couple of weeks is not one mainstream media outlet covered it. Actually, I take that back. It wasn't 0. It was 1, and that was Fox News. All the rest of the mainstream media, not one of them covered that story. And to me, that just goes to what I've always said about the mainstream media and the narrative that they're trying to spin. And that is, if that's all you watch, if you just watch one source, you're not getting the whole story. And it's almost to the point now where it's insulting, because the people that just watch that one thing, and I know several people who that's all they watch. They honestly have no idea what's going on in the world. It's their little echo chamber, and that's it. So I found that fascinating, and the number is 0 there. And this is not the first time it's happened. It actually happened in October of last year during the campaign, where a month before the election, the whole dust up and the whole scandal about Hunter Biden's laptop came out. And I'll never forget this. Watching NPR, and I actually watch NPR every day, and I do that just so I can balance out what I'm looking at and where I'm getting my information. So I'm able to talk to you guys about these sorts of things because I do watch them. What shocked me when the Hunter Biden scandal first broke, literally on NPR, they said, we think it's disinformation, and so we're not going to cover it, period. They did not touch it for that entire month of October leading up to the election. And oh, by the way, none of the other mainstream media outlets, with the exception of Fox News, covered it either. So the idea of 0 coverage on very newsworthy, regardless of what side of the aisle you're on, a very newsworthy topics that are of the day. The fact that nobody covered it I found shocking. And hopefully you all do too out there as well. So the next two numbers are 1 and 2, or in this case, 2 and 1. So you all remember several months ago when the whole debate about the Build Back Better legislation was going through Congress. And while that was going through and while that was getting hung up, there was also talk about changing the filibuster rules so that the Democrats could push this whole Build Back Better thing through Congress. And basically what stopped that in its tracks and killed it were two senators, and they were actually Democratic senators, Manchin and Sinema. And me personally, I'm very glad that happened. I think both of those things would have been very bad for our country. And the fact that two people stood up against their party were pretty much able to sideline all of that. I thought that was great. I thought that was very noteworthy. And obviously, those two individuals are getting hammered still as a result of that. The number one, what came of that, I found this fascinating, is the Democrats, after it died on the floor, the Democrats came back and said, okay, our plan now is we're going to break up the whole Build Back Better thing into smaller pieces and see if we can try to get those through and get those laws passed. And what I find fascinating about this is actually one of the things, if you were to ask me, Brian, what are two things that we could do today? If you were king for a day and you said, I want you to do these two things to make Washington, D.C. work better and to make it more of what I think we had or our founders had envisioned it being. One of the two things that I would say would be one topic laws, or one subject laws, I guess is a better way to say it. And that is, so now the Democrats said, okay, we're going to break these up. We're going to break up the whole Build Back Better and try to debate and pass through each of these items one at a time. And obviously, in reality, it's not going to be one at a time. It'll be just smaller clusters of it. But in my utopian world of how I think things should work, one issue legislation. You would put one piece of legislation up for a vote. You debate it. Everybody can see both the pros and cons of it. And hopefully we'd figure out a way to move forward with that one particular subject matter. And just in my own experience, talking with people on the other side of the aisle, and I have a lot of friends on the other side of the aisle, if we were to sit down across a table with a bottle of wine, by the end of our conversation, we'd both actually be pretty close in terms of how our view of how things are supposed to be in that particular instance. And so I think one at a time, debating it, coming up with a path to move forward, seems to me like it would work. And again, that's a very probably naive, but definitely utopian version of how things should work. And I wish that would, I personally think that Washington would work a lot better. There'd be a lot less corruption. There'd be a lot less pork in all of these laws. So the numbers 2 and 1 right there, I think are very, very interesting. So the next two numbers are 17, 34, and 60%. And I read this article about a month ago that I found fascinating because I have not heard it talked about anywhere else. And so it's very interesting, but it also could be very, very monumental if this were to ever take place. And what am I talking about? The Convention of States, which is the idea that in order to change any part of the Constitution, there needs to be a Convention of States. And in order to convene a Convention of States, you need to have 60% of the states agree that we need to debate a certain aspect of the Constitution to make a change to it. And so obviously 60% is a huge hurdle to get over. And I think the founders were smart in doing that because in my personal view, the Constitution is an amazing document that should not be changed on a whim, should not be changed as the wind blows, whether it's a Democrat in the administration or a Republican in the administration. That Constitution needs to be rock solid because the concepts within that, I think, are amazing. So getting back to the numbers, it takes 60% of the states to convene a convention of states. So a couple of months ago, I read an article where two more states, and I forgot, one was Wisconsin and I forgot the other one. Two more states had signed on to this ballot, which puts us at the number of 17. So 17 out of 34. 34 would give us 60% of the states, which would then convene the Convention of States. So yes, we're very far away. I mean, that's only 50% of the number that you need. But I did find it fascinating that slowly but surely that number on that ballot seems to be creeping up. And who knows, maybe if it gets to 25 out of 34, maybe that's going to be a newsworthy event. I don't know. For me personally, that to me would be amazing, primarily because on the ballot or on the list of topics that would be considered that they would consider changing in terms of the Constitution and how it's written, one of the items was term limits. And that's the number two thing. If you had asked me if I was king for a day, what would I do to change Washington to make it work better and make it more in line with what the founders had wanted it to be, it would be term limits. And I've had amazing debates with friends about this. And why do I say that? Well, first of all, of the three branches of government, only one branch of the three has a term limit, and that's the presidency. The judiciary does not, and the legislature does not. So my ideal would be put a term limit on the number of terms that a legislature, a congressman, or a senator need or can serve. And so how does it work right now? Well, every 2 years and every 4 years, they go back to their constituents for an election. And they, generally speaking, the majority of incumbents get reelected. And that's why you have people like Schumer, like McConnell, like Pelosi, name the top tier of both sides of the aisle that have been there for 20, 30, 40 years. That's when you get people like that. And at that point, they are just part of the system. And right now, the system is totally corrupted, and everybody knows that. And so what I would love to see is you put term limits on that. So he could be the greatest, or she could be the greatest candidate ever, the greatest senator ever, but they've got 3 terms or 2 or 4 or whatever the number is, at least something where they're not there for their entire adult life, i.e. a guy like Joe Biden. And why do I say that? Why do I think that would be beneficial for our country? I watched an interview several years ago that really stuck with me. They were basically interviewing a lobbyist, and the interviewer asked this person, the discussion was about money and the influence of money on our politics. And everybody knows that it's unbelievable right now. Money talks, and the people who are providing that money are basically getting whatever they want. And it's a shame. It's corrupted. It's fallen so far from what the original intent is. So I digress there. So anyway, the interviewer asks this lobbyist, what would be, in your view, obviously you can't get rid of the money. The money's there. It's part of the system. But how can you reduce its influence? And one of the things that this lobbyist said was term limits. Have new people coming in every 5-6 years. And I found that fascinating. And the idea was that when you get a hold of a politician and he's in there for 30 years, he basically is doing your bidding by the end of that time. There's a friendship, there's a relationship there. Obviously, there's a lot of money being made back and forth. But if you have to, as a lobbyist, as someone whose job it is to influence politicians with money, with all of these things, if every certain period of time you have to go back and start from scratch and establish a relationship with somebody, that inevitably slows down the flow of money into that individual, which slows down the influence that it has on that individual. And I've always thought that would be an ideal situation. But again, right now, this is Rain Man living in his dream world. This is a utopia that obviously cannot exist. But if it did, it would be the one topic legislation for debate, and it would be limit a number of terms, and then they're done, so that they get a fresh cycle of individuals and of talent through DC. Okay, the last two numbers I want to talk about are 270 versus tens of thousands. And I don't know the exact number, but I do know it's well over 10,000. And why do I bring those two numbers up? So everyone's heard about Joe Rogan and Spotify and the dust up that Joe is having with Neil Young. Neil had come out several weeks ago, accusing Joe of misinformation about COVID, and demanded that Spotify either deplatform him or at the very least censor him. And one of the things he used in his argument was that, in my view, infamous document that was signed by 270 so-called health experts that were calling for more censoring of misinformation. And I find that fascinating because on the one side, the people that are yelling for the censoring as a document that was signed by 270 individuals. And on the other side, the people that are saying, no, the science is not settled. There are different ways of looking at this. There are different ways of being effective with this. That side of the argument has things like the Great Barrington Declaration that was signed early on in 2020 by over 10,000 physicians who are talking about concepts that are completely against the current narrative coming out of DC and the mainstream media. And so you have this kind of out of balance argument that the people that are screaming the loudest for censorship, the number of people that seem to be behind that, and then the people who are just wanting to open up, be more free, that the policies that are in place are not effective. That side of the argument's got multiple thousands of people that have signed on to that. So I found that very interesting that in my mind's eye, you get that little cartoon of the little guy punching against the big guy's knees. And the little guy is screaming the loudest type of thing. So I found those two things fascinating. And as a aside to that whole argument, I'm very glad that at least so far, Spotify has held its ground. Joe Rogan has acknowledged all of the criticism against him, has apologized, has put in place some things that he'll do differently moving forward. But they're holding their ground. He's not being censored. He's not being censored. He's not being deplatformed. And I credit Spotify for that. And that kind of takes me back to my original point in all of this, is this whole podcast. And that is, to me, censorship and the whole cancel culture and the cancellation of individuals who have an alternative way of looking at a topic, that is about as dangerous as it gets for a free society. If you cannot express your own opinion without fear of having your bank account seized or being canceled off certain platforms, then I think we're in really, really deep trouble. And so I'm glad that at least of today, or at least as of today, that seems to be the case, and Rogan has seemed to have weathered the storm. So I think that's a very interesting comparison of two numbers there. Another number that I wanted to touch on, or another comparison of numbers that I wanted to touch on, and this has to do directly with the whole Rogan Spotify issue that's going on right now, and that is, as soon as Neil Young came out with this, all the mainstream media just jumped on board, trying to get Rogan off of the airwaves. And what I find fascinating, and I'll just use Brian Stelter from CNN as an example, but you could probably pool all of the mainstream media talking heads, all of their shows together, and they would be a fraction of what Joe Rogan gets in terms of his audience. So a guy like Brian Stelter, CNN, I don't know if his show gets 1 million people that watch him every episode. Joe Rogan gets 11 million people listening to his podcasts. So again, it's that little guy punching the big guy's knees, screaming the loudest to get the alternative viewpoint canceled. So when I watch that on television, I feel. Obviously, I'm laughing and I'm embarrassed for that person, but their lack of awareness is glaring to me. And it may not even be that. I mean, Stelter's job is to say what he's going to say, and Joe Rogan's job is to interview and talk to people and say what he's going to say with those people. And you see the vast discrepancy in the size of the audiences, which directly correlates to the discrepancy in the amount of influence that they have. And so that's the reason why CNN is trying to get rid of him, because he's way too powerful and he touches way too many numbers of people as opposed to what CNN and the other mainstream media outlets do. So that's it. Those are the numbers that I just want to touch on: 0, 1, 2, 17, 34, 270, thousands, and then 11 million. In closing, I just want to say, as always, if you're in the military, the police departments, fire departments, or first responders, if that's you out there, thank you very much for your service. Stay safe. This is the Rain Man. Keep an eye out for more content. And if you like what we're doing over here, please remember to subscribe and hit the like button so we can continue providing more interesting subject matter for you. All right, guys, this is the Rain Man. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching Rain Man's Take, observations on the world we live in. If you like the content, don't forget to hit the subscribe button below. You can also follow Rain Man's Take on Instagram at Rain Man's Take. Also, check out our website at www.rainmanstakepodcast.com and send your comments to rainmanstake@gmail.com. Keep an eye out for future podcasts, which will be coming out every Thursday at 5 p.m. West Coast time.